How y'all doing? The Prophet, an audiobook by Phoenix Rising, a New Way Forward production, Chapter 2. The Devil's in the Details. And he sure is. He's also in each one of us. And that's one of the details that's hardest to follow or hardest to get to. My name is Arvin, in case you haven't heard that before. And I am doing a course in history. I'm a historical facilitator. Just a quick recap for those that haven't been following along. We have here 12 people from all over the earth. It is the year in your timeline, 2087. And a lot of what we're doing here, I'm sending back to my own self back in the year 2025 because that was an important year for me and for the earth. It was the beginning of it wasn't the beginning. It was during a transition period between the 3D and the 5D. And by doing this here, sending myself these messages, I am trying to give myself a heads up on some of the things that did happen or about to happen. Although the main emphasis of this here course is to help people in my timeline here now by training these 12 people here with me to go back to their own communities and train 12 more. And the ones that they train, 12 will train 12 more. Go forth and spread the good word. Go forth and multiply. If we learn from history, it also gives us the opportunity, which is one heck of a good opportunity, not to repeat the bad things or some of the things that happened. We can learn from our mistakes. We can also learn from the good things that we did. It's all about helping people and helping our planet. Because our Mother Earth is where we live, and if we don't take care of her, she won't take care of us no more. And that's one of the things we did learn in 2025. And it was a transmutal time. It was a transition of one of a kind. Now, we talked in chapter 1, we started the concept of old sayings and ancient wisdom. And we're going to continue with that. And I'm going to ask your forgiveness and your forbiddance at this point in time that some of the things I kind of get halfway through and don't quite get the finish on, and that's on purpose. I know it's terrible of it, but I got to have my fun. And the truth is, you all got to learn from some things for your own self to start asking the question. That's part of what we call nowadays and what being in touch. In 2025, back then, there was a lot of people talking about mindfulness, living in the moment. Well, some people mistook that for giving them a license to do whatever the hell they wanted to, regardless of how it affected other people or the planet. Well, mindfulness means a couple different things. One of the things that it should mean, or is supposed to mean, is paying attention to detail. Because the devil's in the detail. Now that's one of the old sayings we're going to look at a little further today. Another one is, it just slipped my mind. Well, it's the role that the mind plays, actually. You see, your experiences. Yeah, that's right. Rilo's here. I'm going to explain more about all the folks here. Rilo and I just have a special connection because of our age group and a lot of the similar experiences. We just did them in different parts of the world, didn't we, brother? Yeah, we did. But he got a big grin on his face right now. Flashbacks. But your experiences and the things that you go through create a perspective. And those memories and those perspectives create your thought patterns. And one of the things we didn't think about back then a lot was that those thought patterns are what create your perspective and therefore your actions. But the truth is, your heart, your feelings, your absorption of vibrations, of universal vibrations, and those vibrations of the things around you, which is different from the things that you see or you perceive, because we don't always fully recognize what these vibrations are and what these perceptions or their influence on our perceptions unless we are truly mindful, meaning that we open our mind to the possibility that there's more. There's more. There's always more. Now that little bit that I just did there, could you feel it? Or could you hear it? Could you hear the sadness? Or the slowing down to give a thought? That's what I call earth music, because it has the vibrations of the earth. And it's a way to help you get in touch. But we're going to go on a little bit more about those kinds of things there. And like I said, I don't always give the exact answer, because the reason is you got to learn for your own damn self. You got to feel that there's more. Okay, that's an important thing, to feel that there's more. The other one was no good deed goes unpunished. That was a very popular saying for a lot of years, and a lot of truth to it. But as with all things in life, there is a balance to it. All things are reciprocal. There's a yin and a yang to everything, and there's a movement, there's a breathing back and forth of that yin and yang. Now, you want to call it positive and negative energy, you want to call it light and dark, you want to call it whatever the hell you want to call it, go ahead. I mean, whatever's going to help you remember it, right? Remember. Well, sometimes I just get lazy with my words. Have to forgive that, won't you? Not much you can do about it. That's not being arrogant. I'm just recognizing one of my own flaws, because I'm full of them. I am good and bad all in the same time. The prophet, he told me that the way he pictured it. Now, mind you, he was an old man when I met him back in 2025. I was just a spring chicken back then. Now I'm an old rooster. He told me that he pictured it like having a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, like the old cartoons from the, well, we're talking way back when, days of Bugs Bunny and Warner Brothers cartoons. Ike Freeling, man, those guys. There's a lot of true wisdom in some of them old cartoons. Not the ones during the war era where they were trying to convince people of stuff and twist people's minds around about having hate. They wanted to build hate for their war. That's all. You get people angry enough, they'll do stupid things. But it's easier to get them to convince them to go out and try to kill somebody if they fill them up with hate first. And that's one of the bad things we've had in the last, oh God, 20, 30, 50,000 years in human history. That's one of the tricks that they used, was to manipulate people through hate and through confusion. Because there was always some bitch that wanted greed, wanted power over other people, and they figured if they could give them a reason to get upset and get hate, then they could probably control them some. And they did. Oh, they did. There's no question around that. Trouble was, they would try so hard to convince people that their enemy was so bad that they had to be just as bad to beat them. Well, think about that for a minute. Mindfulness, true mindfulness, you'd realize that if you have to be as bad as your enemy, well, hell, you just became them. People that thought they won wars, well, if you look in your historical books from your time period, go back to something like they used to call World War II, that they had to become as evil as what they assumed or what they painted their enemy as being. Well, if the good guys are acting the same as the bad guys, what the hell's the difference? And then they think they won the war. Well, what happened in reality? They're now acting as bad as the other fellows were, so they lost the war. They became the image that they projected onto the others to be able to control people and do what they thought they had to do. Well, that's a negative cycle. Of course it's going to destroy itself. It's just a question of time. It may take 40 years, it may take 50 years, it may take 70 years, it may take a couple hundred years, but it'll destroy itself. It's just time. Now we look at some of the ancient prophets and teachers, the ones that, the prophet, and that's what I'm going to call him. You're not going to ever know his name, because that would change the course of history to the point where it might fall on itself and do something that his biggest fear. What if people start thinking that I'm some kind of prophet and alive? They're going to twist it. They're going to twist it so that some people can say, I know better than y'all, so they can control people. Because they used religion and they used great prophets of history as an excuse to control people. And there were some great prophets. Oh man, there were some good ones. Oh man, Samuel, Daniel, Isaiah, Jesus. The prophet, one of his favorites was Jesus. He was his hero. He was his role model, him and his daddy. I don't mean Jesus' daddy. I mean the prophet's daddy. Those two were his role models. Later on, he studied a lot more about some of the other prophets, including Buddha and Confucius. And I can never say the man's name. I just call him the man from Wudang Mountain. He wrote a book of 5,000 words in poetry and imagery that became the Tao, or Tao, if you're from that part of the world. The path. You know what the path was? It was universal law, how the universe worked. It was math and physics. Of course, Jesus taught math and physics too. That's just the way it was. You hear it barking in the background, yeah. Well, this here studio we happen to have is right next to a school, a learning center for young There's a bunch of 4 and 5 year olds over there. They're learning about themselves and how to take care of themselves. You see, let's see, what did we call it back in your day? The prophet wrote all about, holistic sustainability. See, the prophet wrote a lot about that, how to take care of your own self, how to trust your own self, trust your inner feelings. Because whether it was Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad, another great prophet, and his own family, his father-in-law is the one that twisted his teachings around, and then the followers broke into two sections based on, well, who was the heir? Well, if you listened to the words the man said, you'd realize it didn't make any difference who the heir was. He told you to trust yourself, trust God. You know, they actually had wars about that. You know, Muhammad taught, he came forth with his teachings trying to create peace between two groups that were at struggle at that time. The Christians and the Jews were fighting each other back then. In his day, he believed that he was about 600 years after Jesus, and he believed Jesus was the Messiah, and he was trying to create this balance and peace between the Christians and the Jews because they were fighting each other. Now, then you wait another 600 years, and what do you got? You got Christians and Jews joining up on the same side, fighting against the followers of Muhammad. I mean, my God, think of the irony in that. All these great prophets came teaching peace and teaching math and the path of how to find happiness and harmony with those around you, with all the other people on the earth and the earth itself, and to follow the path of the universe of peace and happiness and harmony, and they use it against people to create wars. Talk about the epitome of irony. They weren't being very mindful, were they? They weren't thinking for their own selves. And that's what the issue is. When you allow somebody else to think for you and tell you what you're feeling, well, that's kind of like selling your soul to the devil, isn't it? You gave up on yourself. God's in you. Buddha said, go find your center. It means go back inside yourself and find where you come from, who you are, what you are. Jesus did the same thing. All the people that were healed by miracles, by Jesus, what did he say? He said, your faith has healed you. Well, what's faith? Belief. Now, other people are going to tell them that you believe in something else, something external. No. Believe in yourself, that you have the power because you have God inside you. And that's what Christian said. Do you accept Jesus into your life? Do you feel God, the Holy Spirit, inside of you? Well, what is the Holy Spirit? Your divine self. Arose by any other name. It's just different ways of explaining the same damn thing. But we are so arrogant, caught up in the ego, and we forgot the id. Well, let's go back to the one here. Everything is balance. Balance and harmony. The back and forth, the ebb and flow. Right? And we both have an angel and both have a devil inside our own selves. Well, what did Jesus say about those kind of things? And if you want to question this one, think of there's a story, I believe, what was it in Mark? I forget now. Probably he'd know. He knew the Bible inside out. He said he read it about 34 times. He read the Torah about 12 times, the Quran about 15. Everything he could get his hands on about Buddha over and over again. Of course, he also read and talked to shaman and indigenous cultures all over the world and talked to their spiritual leaders. Got their perspective on things. Well, here, just a quick caveat, and I have a bad habit of doing this, so just bear with me if you would. Okay, and that is when he was in Africa, he said he spent several nights with a shaman in a village in the jungle, no electricity, had to undress across the river to get to this particular village. And they were playing music one night and having some palm wine and stuff, and the shaman showed up and did his dance and did his spiritual thing. Now, this village was about, according to the prophet, he said it was, I forget now exactly, it was like 5 kilometers, or that's about 3 miles, from depending upon which system you grew up with. But it was a short distance away from a church, a Methodist church, which was the scene of a massacre of missionaries. See, back in the 1800s, European churches used to send their people out doing a terrible thing. It was a terrible, terrible thing. They had good intentions, but the road to hell's paved with good intentions. They went to the jungle to save these poor heathens. Well, simply thinking that they was heathens showed them no respect whatsoever, so there's no love there. It was twisted. And these missionaries showed up and said, "You all going to hell because you don't believe the same thing I do." Well, they just had a different way of expressing it, because these missionaries thought that the locals didn't believe in God. And the prophet would say, he laughed his head off when he said, he goes, "The stupidest thing in the world." He's talking to this shaman, he's a spiritualist, and he says, these people believed in God more than anybody I ever met, or he'd ever met, right? I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, the shaman explained to me," he goes, "I want you to think about something. There's only one God." Now, how did he know this? Because this other fellow who's on the prophet, he was a volunteer back in those days. Another volunteer from a different country had shown up on a different program, and came over because he heard there was another North American there playing music, so he went over to the other volunteer and to meet the prophet and have some fun. Anyway, he showed up and they were talking about all this stuff, and somehow it came out that the other feller said he was an atheist. And the villagers and the shaman, he said, well, they didn't even know the word. He said, well, what does that mean? He said, I don't believe in God. And the prophet said they rolled on the ground laughing. They thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. What do you mean you don't believe? Why do you get up in the morning if you don't believe in God? They couldn't understand it. I mean, it was such a foreign concept. They simply couldn't understand it. They thought it was a joke. Anyway, the shaman had told the prophet, he said, of course we believe in God. Everything around us is God. Well, that's walking the walk and talking the talk. That's living the life. Not setting up some church and telling other people that they're wrong. That's living the life. He said the problem was, and the shaman was a wise man. He said the problem was those missionaries had showed up with this vision, this closed-mindedness, and this arrogance, this ego, to the extreme that they told us we were going to hell because we didn't believe in God. That they said we had many gods. And they said, don't be so stupid. There's only one God. He's everywhere. He said we have different names for different aspects of God. The same way you have a body. Well, the entire universe is God. The earth is God. But you in your body, you have fingernails. You have different names for your different fingers. You have your wrist. You have a forearm. You have an upper arm. You have names for all the different parts of your body. We just have different names for all the parts of God that we see. Different actions of God doing things. The wind in the trees has a name. It's God doing this. The flow of the river is God doing this. But if you don't have an open mind and an open heart and respect, then you can't learn. And let's face it, Life is a learning curve. And if you ain't moving forward, and that means learning from others every day, and that comes from mutual respect, then you're going backwards. Those people, I'm not saying that those missionaries were bad people, but they weren't open to God. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing because you think you know enough. And none of us knows enough. It's a constant learning curve. Duh. If you got the love, and that's what every religion talks about, the power of God is the power of love. Love has a color. It's not way down there. It's up here. Love has a color. Love has a frequency. Love has a feeling. God is love. God is life. Ergo, love is life. Let's go back to it now. No good deed goes unpunished. Well, if no good deed goes unpunished, what does that mean? And what is if that's the flow, what's the ebb? Reciprocity. Man, that word won't come out. You stop that grin, you. Okay, you're right. You're right. I'm messing it up. But it's an ebb and a flow. Okay. Yeah, you, the youngin over here. How old are you? 18. You've been on this earth 18 years, and you can find the humor that God bless you. I can learn from you. Thank you. See, the ebb and the flow. Let's start out with one direction first. If I do a good deed, and we're talking electromagnetic, then there is an opposite energy that is attracted to that, because opposites attract with electromagnetic force. So I did something good, but something perceivably bad, and notice I use the word perceivably, is going to be attracted to that. Why? Trying to find a balance. Because the universe seeks balance. Because of this electromagnetic energy that flows in the universe. So if I perceive the action that I'm doing as good, the opposite I probably will perceive as bad. And it'll be attracted to me. But energy is a wonderful thing. It converts. Because it's always in seeking of balance. So no good deed goes unpunished. And what's the opposite of that? No bad deed goes unrewarded. What's the opposite of punishment? Reward. So anything that we perceive as negative coming at us, in the natural harmony of the universe, if we are open-hearted and open-minded, now you're starting to get it. There's no bad that good don't come from. In other words, remember, if you were in chapter 1, we talked about the yin and the yang symbol. You have a dark paisley or a black paisley with a white dot in the middle. It's root. And it is balanced or hugging. I like to say hugging. A white paisley with a black dot in the middle. It's root. That's the meaning of that symbol, the balance of life. From what appears to be a negativity, doth light grow. Or for what is dark is converted into light. And oftentimes what is light is converted into dark, because that's the balance. Now think about that. Let's go back to that old cartoon. We got an angel on one side of our shoulders and a devil on the other. Well, where do these angel and devil come from? See, people like to say that, oh, that's the external, that's God and the devil. The hell it is. It's you or me or whoever. You look at those old cartoons. Now you got Sylvester the Cat. And if you haven't ever heard of Sylvester the Cat, go back and look at some of these old cartoons. I know there was a time they called them inappropriate and racist and everything else. Okay? But given the time that they were made in a manner to reach the largest percentage of the population that could associate with them. You cannot take an apple from 1917 and say it's rotten today, because it's not from today. And that apple back in 1917, when it was fresh picked off the tree, was sweet. It was nutritious. It was right for its time. Yeah, you try to pick it up today, man, it's a mess. And you don't want nothing to do with it. It's going to kill people. A little bit of common sense. A little bit of logic. Understanding. Compassion. All the attributes of what we consider to be good and lovable. You can't change the past. It's already happened. Although that's exactly what I'm trying to do right here by sending myself back these things. I'm trying to help facilitate the past. I'm not going to change it myself. I'm giving myself a chance to make a difference and a few other people back then, to help me have a better understanding of what the prophet was saying. Because a lot of the things the prophet said, it's taken me a lot of years to figure it out. He gave me my time to understand. Now, I don't know if I can change the past or not. Well, I can know. Actually, I do know. I guess I do. Well, that was an epiphany. Thank you, God. Thank you, Spirit. I love it when my angels and the Lord talk to me like that, man. Oh. Anyway, I do. Because I already sent back chapter 1, and I sent back a couple other little caveats. And I have noticed a couple little things. Actually, you brought the attention to me, didn't you? Yeah. Shia. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. Yeah. Brought back came in today, this morning, before we started the class today, or started the session today. And she explained to me that she was talking to her family last night, and they were talking about one of her aunts. And she said, that great aunt had perished back in the turmoil. But her parents say she's alive now. That she didn't perish. So we did change one thing. We have a blessed soul that's still with us. So we did make a little change. Yeah. And the question came up, because we had a little discussion before we turned on the recording devices today, that do we have the right? It's an ethical question. Do we have the right to make these changes in history? And then we realize that time doesn't exist. Yes, you can change history. You could, because there's only moments. And if the moments of love, it has power, future and historical. We're changing our future history now. Everyone is. Every day you're changing your future history. What's the difference between future and past? There is no time. That's another thing we'll get into. Mr. Einstein and his thought experiments. I love those, man. The prophet used that a lot. I'll tell you, he loved those too. A thought experiment would save you time and energy to try to figure something out, and would bring epiphanies left, right, and center. Another man who loved his thought experiments was Nikola Tesla, not the other one that used that other fellow that used his name. No, the real one, right? Of course, he credited all of his insight, his epiphanies, to a series of books called the Vedas. Yes, because the Vedas they were pretty descriptive of some scientific things, right? And if you had the patience to actually open-mindedness to, when you looked at them, you could see some truths, and some truths that transcended time. And that's what we're talking about now, truth that transcends time. In other words, the path. Now, when we talk about the devil's in the detail, what happens when you stop learning? That's the detail. A lot of the old sayings that we use, it says, money is the root of all evil. Well, that's not they twisted that quotation. Why? To convince people that money was bad and that good people would have an aversion. Yeah, I guess that's the right word, aversion to money. That they would